Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend some time with me as I look at the year 2023 from a board gaming perspective. Yes, you are probably watching this video in February 2024, but I contest that any video along these lines that is released prior to 2024 is doing it wrong and is treating December very unfairly. But anyways, 2023 was an excellent year. In fact, it was the best year I've had in board gaming since my whole personal life kind of fell apart in 2020. I'll be going over the usual stats about number of plays and so forth, as well as the worst games and best games of the year. As usual, I've broken down this video into chapters so that you can skip any part that doesn't interest you and just have a look at the things that do. So let's get into this excellent year. We'll start out by looking at the numbers of games played along with some ratings that are associated with those numbers. I have my games played separated into two categories. I have the games that I had previously played that were not new to me in 2023, and the games that were new to me that I played for the first time in 2023. Starting with that first category, by way of comparison to the previous year, in 2022 I had 59 plays of 34 unique games, and of those 34 games, the average rating was 7.5 out of 10. In 2023, however, I had 131 plays of 47 unique games with an average rating of 7.56 out of 10. So I had way more plays of way more games, though on average the rating of those games was very much the same. Quite a high average, which is not a surprise, because if I'm playing a game that I have previously played, more than likely I'm going to be picking up some of my favorite games. Now, in terms of games that were new to me in 2023, again, by way of comparison with 2022, I had 66 plays of 20 unique games with an average rating of 6.8 out of 10 in 2022. For 2023, I had 88 plays of 33 unique games with an average rating, again, of 6.8 out of 10. Well, I do spend a fair bit of time researching games and trying to find ones that I'm going to enjoy quite a bit. I also am a sucker for clearance sales and 50% off sales and finding little games, maybe little two-player games that are only maybe $10, $15 and trying those out. And so because of that, I don't necessarily research as much as I should, and so the average rating isn't super high. From that list, what's also interesting to me is that only two of the games that I played in 2023 were actually released in 2023, those being Wild Tiled West, a game that I rated 8 out of 10, and Sky Team, a game that I rated 8.5 out of 10. So certainly wasn't really going after the hot new stuff, even with the new to me games that I was playing. The top 3 games that had the most plays throughout the year, at number 3 we have Battles of Westeros, in which I played all 10 of the base game campaign games with Paul. So it was super fun over the course of those 10 plays to get through the entire campaign, and I really hope that we continue with some of the expansion campaign content. My second most played game was chess. I played it 16 times. I think pretty much exclusively on phone apps, so just me versus AI opponents. And then my most played game of the year is another one that I played with Paul, and this is My City. We played it 24 times in order to get through the entire Legacy campaign. The game was broken down into 8 chapters. Each chapter had 3 games in it, and we did play through the entire thing. I ended up rating it 8 out of 10. Paul gave it a rating of 8 out of 10 as well. Just to get another person's stats into here too, Paul said that his top 3 most played games were My City, Spirit Island, and Frosthaven, which that one makes me a little bit jealous, to be honest, seeing that Gloomhaven is my number 1 game of all time and Frosthaven is the kind of next step in that game progression. So combining all of those numbers together, I had, in 2022, 125 plays of 54 unique games, whereas in 2023, I had 219 plays of 80 unique games. I'm quite astonished in looking at that number just now that I had 219 plays of games throughout the year. The averages of everything played, again, another couple points of comparison. In 2022, my average of all games played was 7.2 out of 10 in comparison to Paul's 7.6 out of 10, whereas in 2023, my average bumped up ever so slightly to 7.24 out of 10 in comparison to Paul's exact same average of 7.6 out of 10 in looking at the games that Paul and I played together. Next, I'll look at number of games acquired versus number of games that I sold that left the collection. The money I had to acquire games in 2023 came in large part by selling off previously owned games, as well as in large part by my Patreon supporters, who I just want to thank for your support, especially to my higher tier supporters, Charles M, Mojo Dam, Saver Girl, Abo, Joanna N, and my highest tier supporter, Osmondus Perfect. Thank you not only for supporting the work that I do here on YouTube, but also in helping me to keep the fun of my hobbies alive too. So in terms of those numbers then, in 2022, I sold 14 games and acquired 15 games. In 2023, by comparison, I sold 11 games and acquired 14 games plus 2 expansions for existing games. So for the most part, it's a kind of a one in, one out situation with my board game collection. It's been like that for quite a long time, so that I can maintain a balance of roughly 100 games in my collection. Yes, I did acquire a few more than I sold, but I also still have a bunch in a pile off in the corner that are waiting to be sold as well. So at some point in the near future, I'm going to get another auction up and running, I think. What's kind of interesting is that my average rating of games that I acquired this year was only 6.9 out of 10, which is almost identical to the 6.8 out of 10 I rated all the games I played that were new to me. And again, it's a little disappointing to see that average of games that I've spent the money on to add to my collection being, it's not low, but if I'm going to be spending what little, almost non-existent hobby money I have on games, it would be nice to see that average be a little bit higher. And in fact, it's just a smidge lower than my 2022 average of games that I acquired, which was 7 out of 10. But regardless, it's always fun to try new games anyways. Before I get into the worst and best of the year, I'm going to talk about my single best board gaming experience in all of 2023. This happened in July, and it happened with a game that I only rate 7 out of 10. And the two people I played it with, my friend Paul and my son Wyatt, both also rated it 7 out of 10. So it's not a super high rated game, but it gave me the most exciting and fun experience I've had all year. The game itself is Port Royal. This is a push your luck card game where you're flipping cards, trying to get as much stuff as possible to ultimately convert into points without going bust and losing your turn altogether. So in this particular game, I had reached the end game condition of achieving 12 victory points. However, all the other players had to play out the rest of the round to finish up the game altogether. Paul was behind with only 8 points, and yet on his final turn, he had no choice but to go for broke, so he just kept flipping cards, acquiring more and more things, just on the edge of going bust, but he had a literally maximally good turn in terms of what you're able to acquire in this game, and in that final turn, he was able to go from 8 points to 13 points to edge out the victory and beat me by a single point. And that moment was just such a hilarious and exciting moment to experience. And it kind of makes me wonder why I've only played Port Royal the one time in the past few years. Let's now jump to the worst games of the year, and again, I'll give you a couple of data points by showing Paul's and my worst games of the year. Now, just to clarify, these are only the games that Paul played with me specifically. Obviously, he's been playing games with other people throughout the year, but in terms of the games that he played with me that he provided ratings for, these are the lowest of the year. In order to get a good round number of 5 games on this list, I had to basically take all the games that Paul rated less than 7 out of 10. So the best of those games was Cthulhu Realms, a game that I had rated 7 out of 10, but Paul had rated 6.5 out of 10. The next one was Raptor, a game that I rate 7 out of 10 and Paul rates 6 out of 10. I played this one quite a few times. I played this one 6 times throughout the year because Wyatt really fell in love with this game. Next we have Whitehall Mystery, a game that I rate 6.5 out of 10 and I think is a really good hidden movement game that's comparable to Scotland Yard for anyone who grew up playing that game. Paul rates Whitehall Mystery 5.5 out of 10, however, so it wasn't a hit with him. Next up is the only game that overlaps on both of our worst of lists, and this is Prowler's Passage, a game that I rated 5.5 out of 10, Paul rated 4.5 out of 10. It's a highly tactical game with no real luck beyond the initial setup, yet it just wasn't all that exciting either. And then the lowest of the year, the worst of the year for Paul specifically, was Lands of Galzir, a game that I liked quite a bit, actually. I rated it 7.5 out of 10, whereas Paul only rated it 4 out of 10. So that was probably the one game that had the biggest difference between his ratings and mine for the year. Now, my lowest rated games, again, going from highest rating to lowest rating. In this case, I took all games that I rated less than 6 out of 10, which gives me 6 games total to go over. So the first is Quarriors, a game that I rate 5.5 out of 10. I hate to see it on this list because this is a game that Evan got for Christmas, and he absolutely loves the game. I do really enjoy playing it with Evan, though. So my statistical rating of the game isn't necessarily an indication of how much I enjoy sitting at a table and playing it with Evan. Next up is Prowler's Passage. Like I mentioned, I had rated it 5.5 out of 10. Paul was 4.5 out of 10. Next one was another game that I got in Evan for Christmas. This was Basketball Highlights Crunch Time, a game that I rate 4 out of 10. I thought I might give it one more try before sending it off to the for sale pile, but Evan didn't even want to play it once more, so off it goes. Next up is a game I played on Board Game Arena called Botanic, which I rated 3.5 out of 10. In fact, the next one is also another one I played on Board Game Arena. This is called Bandito, another 3.5 out of 10 rating from me. And my worst game of all of 2023 was a game called Muffin Time, a game I rate 2 out of 10, yet just like with Quarriors, is a game that I still had fun with because I played it as a large family group with my brothers and my nieces and nephews and my kids, and we had a fun time just sitting around a great big table in a cottage, just flinging cards around. And so while the game itself is not a game that I enjoy, it was an experience that I enjoyed, if that makes any sense. So it goes to show that even some of the worst games ever can provide really great family experiences. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned there. I don't know. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the best of the best, starting once again with Paul. So in order to get 6 games for Paul's list, I took everything that he rated 9 out of 10 or higher, starting with Brass Birmingham, a game that unfortunately I only rated 6 out of 10. I just thought it's okay, but it's pretty big and convoluted and not super exciting. Paul, however, rates it 9 out of 10, and I would definitely be interested in playing it again with Paul because it does provide some interesting strategical puzzles and whatnot, and I didn't dislike the game. Next we have Railways of the World, plus its various expansions. We played Railways of Mexico and Railways of Europe last year. I love this game too. I rate it 8.5 out of 10, and Paul rates it 9 out of 10. Now, Paul's 4 best of the year are all overlaps with my own best of the year, so we're going to see some spoilers here. We have King Domino Origins, a game that both Paul and I rate 9 out of 10, and it's a game that got quite a few plays. It got 6 plays throughout the year, but our next game got played even more, and this is Spirit Island, a game that I rate 9 out of 10 and Paul rates 9.5 out of 10. We played this one 10 times, apparently. We did? How did that not make my most played games of the year? I guess that should have been tied with Battles of Westeros at my 3rd most played game of the year. But it's a great cooperative game, although it is quite complex. All right, Paul's 2nd best of the year was Clank Catacombs, a game that both he and I rate 9.5 out of 10. Such an amazingly fun version of an old favorite, Clank. A deck building dungeon delving game that's super fun. And then Paul's number 1 of the year, Planet Unknown. I rate it 9 out of 10. He gives it a perfect 10 out of 10. Now let's flip over to my list and see some of those games again. So I also limited myself to games that were rated 9 out of 10 or higher. In this case, though, I have 8 games that fall within that rating scale. Starting at the very bottom, which is still a game I rate 9 out of 10, and that is Battles of Westeros. Paul rates it 8 out of 10, and like I said, we played it 10 times last year, and I just want to keep on playing it even more. Next up, we have Codenames Duet, a cooperative word game that I love. I rate it 9 out of 10. Paul rates it 8.5 out of 10. I would play this one a lot more if given the opportunity. There's just something about it that is just a really great experience with the way I enjoy puzzles and words words and all that stuff. Next is K2 with its expansions. I had Broad Peak and Lotse expansions in play this year, I think. I rate it 9 out of 10. Paul rates it 7.5 out of 10. This is quite a easy to learn, relatively approachable game, even for newish gamers, but it's so tense and exciting and such a cool little game. We have, next up on the list, Kingdomino Origins, which I rate 9 out of 10. Paul rates 9 out of 10. I mentioned this one. We just kept coming back to it over and over again this year because it plays so fast once you know the game, and it's just another interesting puzzle. Next up is Spirit Island. For me, 9 out of 10. For Paul, 9.5. This game has just so much expansion content. You could really play this game forever and not get bored with it, I think, if you enjoy the type of game that it is. Planet Unknown is next, where I rate 9 out of 10. Paul was a perfect 10 on this one. A polyomino tile laying game with some other interesting stuff going on the side. My second best of the year was Clank Catacombs, a game that both Paul and I rate 9.5 out of 10. I love the random map that you build in Clank Catacombs in contrast to the fixed maps that I have with my version of Clank and its various expansions. I was worried about the randomness that this would add to the game, but it turns out it adds a lot more fun to the game. And my number one game of the year is my number one game of all time. This is Gloomhaven, a perfect 10 out of 10 for me. Unfortunately, the format in which I played it was on Steam, and my computer is just too old and weak to handle such a game, so the gameplay experience was pretty frustrating, but just to get a feel for that old favorite again was, as I mentioned, kind of bittersweet. But what an amazing game it is for people who enjoy enormous, massively complex RPG style gaming. It just can't be beat for my money. And that was my excellent year in gaming. How was your gaming last year? What was your number one favorite game you played last year? What was your favorite new to you game last year? I would just love it if you would get into the comments and let me know. Are there any releases coming out this year that you're super excited about that I should check out as well? It would mean a lot to me if you took the time to talk a little bit about that, because I enjoy reading that, and it's a huge part of the fun of making these videos. Regardless, I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers. Yes, as usual, I've also broken this video down into chapters so that you can skip any part that is not We'll start out here with some into games that I had previously. In 2022, I had 2023, on the other hand, God. My objective rating of the game, and it was one of our more